Okay, Rabbi Say, so tonight's talk is being sponsored by Rabbi Avraham Bogopolsky, the Rav of the Beth Jacob Shul in San Diego, California, and dedicated Le'ilui Nishmas, his mother, Aleo HaSholem, whose yortzeit is tonight, Tehei Nishmasa Tzrura B'Tzrura Chayim, and may her legacy continue to live on through her wonderful children and grandchildren. Lo yamushu mipicha umipi zaracha umipi zera zaracha ad olam. We've spoken about the Chet HaEgel before, but in Parshas Ki Sisa, it's Parshas HaShavua, how can we not talk about it once again? The first question is, how relevant is the Chet HaEgel to us? It seems so removed from our world. You might have noticed that the minhag is that in Parshas Ki Sisa, we call up the Levi for the entire story of the Egel. The Levi gets 46 psukim in his Aliyah, and the Yisrael is called up after we finished with the whole story of the Egel. This minhag is brought in the Knesset Hagdolah and quoted in the Magen Avraham in Siman Tov Chof Ches, and the reason is like it says in Sefer Chasidim Siman Tov Shin Samaches, and that's quoted in the Magen Avraham in the end of Siman Kuf Lamed Ches. The Sefer Chasidim says that you shouldn't call up an oile l'Torah when the kriya is the kind of kriya that might embarrass him. Therefore, somebody that's a summa ba'ayin achas, you shouldn't call him up for the kriya of iveres oy shavur, because and so also somebody that's choshud, suspected of having being a bal avera in a certain avera, you shouldn't call him up for the psukim that discuss that avera shaloi levaya shoysa. And therefore, since we all are guilty of the Chet HaEgel, we don't call up a Yisrael for this Kriya, and we call up a Levi because Shevet Levi wasn't Choite in the Chet HaEgel. So it's interesting because we don't find that somebody who had a great-grandfather who was a Summa, Ba'ayin Achas, we don't call him up for the Kriya of Iveres or Ishavur. And neither do we find that somebody whose great-grandfather was a Balavera, it was a Ganav, you're not going to call him up for Loisik Noivu. So why is it that when it comes to the Chet HaEgel, all Yidden are not called up for this Aliyah? Mustama the Pshat is like, in the end of the Parsha of the Egel, it says, Va'ato, and now Leich Necheyes Ha'om, El Asher Dibarti Loch, go lead the people to Eretz Yisrael. Hine Malochi Yelech Lefonecha Ubiyoim Fokti Ufakadati Aleim Chatosam. So what does that mean? Rashi says, Ato Shamati Eilecha Milechaloisom Yachad. I did accept your tefillah, and I'm not going to annihilate them now. V'tomid tomid kishe'efkoid aleihem avoinoisehem. Whenever I will punish them for their averis, ufakadati aleihem ma'at min ha'avoin hazeh im shar ha'avoinos. Ve'ein puronus bo al Yisrael she'ein bo ktsas mipiroin chet ha'egel. As the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, so in every generation, if we're being punished for any sin, there's an add-on to the punishment, which is a ma'at punishment for the Chet HaEgel, which the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't totally punish us at the time. But how is this possible? We know that it says in Parshas Ki Sisa, ubanim loy yumsu al avos, ish bechetoy yumasu. A person dies for his own sins. Children are not responsible for their parents' sins. So how could it be that in every ufakadati aleihem avoinam, that every time the Rebbeinu Shalom punishes us for our sins, he adds on a punishment for the Chet HaEgel? Is the chlo yumsu bonim al avos. The pshat must be because the Gemara says it's at Hedron Daf Chav Zayin. The Gemara asks that there's a stira between this pasuk of Lo Yumsu Banim Al Avos Ish Bechetoi Yumasu and the pasuk that we have in the Aseret Adibris that says Poikei Davoin Avos Al Banim Al Shileshim Va'al Ribeim L'Soinoi. And the Gemara answers, as Rashi brings it in Parshas Ki Sisa, Kan Ba'oichzin Masei Avoseim B'Yadeim. So when the children continue in their father's ways, in his sinful ways, then they are also punished for their father's sins. And that's what the Gemara says. That's why the pasuk says, if they are soinoi, then they are also punished for the sins of their fathers. So, if Chazal are telling us that we, in all generations, continue to be punished for the Chet HaEgel together with our sins, it must be that in our sins, there's always an oichzin, maasei avosehem b'yadehem of the Chet HaEgel. And therefore, it's justified that we be punished together with our sins for the Chet HaEgel. It's poikei avoin avos al bonim, al shileshim v'al ribeim l'soinoi. But the question is, how is every sin that we do an oichzin masei avosehem b'yadeim of the Chet HaEgel? You know, after the Chet HaEgel, in the beginning of Kapitel Lamed Gimel, it says, "V'sholachti lefneichem malach, v'geirashti es haknani ha'emori," and so on. And I'll bring you a eretz zovas cholav udvosh. Ki loy ale b'kirbecha, Ki am kshei oref oto pen achelcha badorech. So HaKadosh Baruch was saying that he's not going to be present loy ele b'kirbecha because am kshei oref oto pen achelcha baderech, and therefore he's sending a maloch lefonecha. And then it says vayishma ha'om es hadover hora hazeh vayisabolu. They became grief-stricken when they heard this terrible thing. Vayishma ha'omes hadavar hazeh vayisabolu v'lo shosu ish edyoy olov. No one donned his jewelry. V'lo shosu ish edyoy olov. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe emor el bnei Yisrael atem am kshei yoref, etc. Va'ato hoireid edyecha me'alecha. Now remove your jewelry from yourself. And this is already the second pasuk talking about the edyoy, about the jewelry. Now comes the third pasuk. Vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael es edyoy mehar chorev. And they were stripped of their jewelry that they had mehar chorev. So what's happening over here? The first pasuk already said, V'lo shosu ish edyoy olav. So they didn't have the jewelry on them. So what is the meaning of the second pasuk that says Va'ato hoireid edyecha me'olecha, and the third pasuk that says Vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael es edyo? So the Cheskuni is not clear. What is this edyo? What kind of jewelry we're talking about? The Cheskuni says Imshuti shel mikra v'lo shosu ish edyo olav on the first pasuk. Klei kesef u'klei zov u'smolois shoitziu miMitzrayim. So that's what we're referring to as edyoy. The klei kesef, the klei zov, u'smolei shoitziu miMitzrayim. And then he says on the pasuk, hoireid edyecha me'alecha, af al pi shemikvar. Lo shosu edyom, even though mikvar, lo shosu edyom, they weren't wearing it. His hero. Nevertheless, he gave them a hazorah. Originally, they didn't put on their jewelry because they felt vayisabolu. They were grief stricken. But now he's telling them, you don't deserve it. You shouldn't be wearing it. It's still hard to understand how the pasuk uses the term hoireid edyecha me'olecha if they don't have the edyom on them. So in the Daza Kalim Hibalei HaTosfos, after they bring a pirush that's similar to the Cheskuni, they say like this: V'harav Rabbi Yosef Kro or Karo Zichrono Levrocha Piresh V'lo Shosu Ish Edyoy Olav Heim Begodim Chamudim V'Noim Shalovshu Be'eis Matan Torah. The first pasuk is referring to Begodim Chamudim V'Noim that they were wearing from Matan Torah. Kidiksiv Vayichabsu Simloisom, as it says in Parshas Yisroy, that they washed their clothes. So that's the V'loishosu Ish Edyayolov. They weren't wearing the special clothing that they wore, the covered Matan Torah. Aval Hoyrei Edyecha, the second pasuk that says remove the Edyecha, Heim Haksorim Shenitnu Lahem B'Shosha Omru Nasev V'Nishma Upirku Oisam Malachei Chabole B'Shosha Avdu LaEgel Kedamazik Mumsech the Shabbos. So the Gemara says in Shabbos that the Edyecha is the crowns that they got when they said Nasev V'Nishma, and these crowns were removed by Malachei Chabole. V'zeu she'amru vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael. Shenetolum malachei Chabole v'leiksiv vayinatzlu, because they didn't really take it off by themselves. It was taken away from them. They were stripped of the edyom. So Lefize, the edyom of the first pasuk, about which it says v'loi shasu, is not the same adoyim that we're talking about in the second and third pasuk. The first pasuk is talking about klei kesem klei zov shohitziu mitzrayim, and the second and third pasuk are talking about the Ksarim of Matan Torah. But in Rashi, he says on the first pasuk, even though the Gemara is actually talking about the pasuk vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael as edyom, but Rashi already in the first of these three psukim says v'lo shosu ish edyoy olav ksarim shenitnu lohem b'Sinai b'shot she'omru nasev v'nishma. So Rashi understood that Avada, these three consecutive psukim are talking about the same edyom, and it's not like the first pasuk is talking about something else. And therefore, based on the Gemara that says that Vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael as edyom is talking about the crowns that they received at Matan Torah, Nasev and Ishma, so the first pasuk over here is already talking about that. And in the middle, the question comes back. So if it says V'lo shosu ish edyoy olav, so they didn't have those crowns, whatever that means. So how is the next pasuk saying Hoyreid Edyecha me'alecha and Vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael as Edyo mehar chayrev? So there's a fascinating shot in a sefer Teferes LaMoshe of Reb Moshe Misambur, who was a Talmud of the Chosem Lublin, who brings in the name of his Rebbe, that when it says in the first pasuk V'lo shosu ish Edyoy olav, it should be understood like in the pasuk in Parshas Va'era, where it says Vayifen Paroi, Vayelech el Beisoy, V'lo shos liboy gam lezois. He didn't take it to his heart. V'lo shos liboy means he didn't take it to heart. So meaning that they still had those ksorim of Nasev and Ishma, but they were so into the Vayisa Bolu, they felt so bad about themselves, to the point that V'loi shos ish edyoy olav, that people didn't take note of the fact that they have the edyoy olav. They had the edyoy olav, V'loi shos ish edyoy olav. And now he says a shocking and very profound thing. He says that the tzivui of hoyreid edyecha me'alecha, and the fact that the Malachei Chabole came and removed the crowns of Matan Torah, Vayisnatzlu as Edyo mehar chayrev, that was only because V'lo shosu ish edyoy olav. If even when they were Vayisabol, they would have still taken note that they still have those crowns, that in spite of the great grave sin, they didn't completely lose their chashivas, they didn't completely lose their madrega, then the crowns would not be taken from them. And they could have still returned to their original madrega through tshuva. The problem was v'lo shosu ish edyoy olav, and since v'lo shosu ish edyoy olav, it was taken away from them. So it comes out, Lefise, that the long-lasting effects of the Chet Egel are not a consequence of the Chet itself, but a consequence of the Vayisabolu that was so deep that V'lo Shosu Ish Ed Yoyolov. So how we meant to understand this? I mean, with the great grave sin of the Egel, we could somehow give the Chanes. But V'lo Shosu Ish Ed Yoyolov, the lack of recognition of our Madrega, that's the problem. So it would seem that the V'lo Shosu Ish Ed Yoyolov is really shaykh to the Iker Chet of the Egel. And this is really what made it permanent, so to speak. And as we'll explain, why did they make the Egel? In Rishonim, it's mavur that the Egel was really not meant to be an Avodah Zarah. It was meant to be something in which, with Aaron HaKohen would imbue it with some divine powers. This Egel would become empowered with divine powers and be able to lead them. I mean, something like the Golem of Prague. Yeah, this Egel was supposed to lead them somehow, but it was leadership through the Rebbeinu Shalom. It wasn't that they really thought that this Egel has powers of its own. Yeah, but nevertheless, why did they make an Egel? I mean, what was the issue? I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't return. They thought he died. So the obvious candidate would be Aaron. Why did they decide that the next step is to make a golden calf? Right? So that was the answer is in the pasuk, because the pasuk says that they said Kizeh Moshe Hoish Lo Yodanu Mahoyoloi. So they don't say Ki Moshe Lo Yodanu Mahoyoloi. They say Zeh Moshe Hoish Lo Yodanu, Moshe the man, meaning that they weren't disappointed in Moshe on a personal level, but they were disappointed in human leadership in general. They said that an Ish is not reliable. Listen, he's here, he's there, he expires. Aseilonu Elohim asher yelchu lefoneinu. By Kriyas Yamsuf, it says, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdoi. So there's a famous shtickle from Reb Tzadok HaKohen. I might have shared this with you in the past, in the Tzidkas HaTzadik, Ois Kuf Nun Dalet, where he writes, Kishem shetzorich odom lahamin b'Hashem yizborach. Just like one has to believe in the Rebbeinu Shalom, kach tzorich achakach lahamin ba'atzmai. So he needs to believe in himself. What does it mean he needs to believe in himself? Sometimes it takes a very big emunah, because when you look in the mirror, I mean, what you see, it doesn't really justify your positive thoughts about yourself. But kach tzorich lahamin ba'atzmai. Now he says, what do I mean? He's not like an animal. So what does it mean they believed in Moshe? So he says, Pirush Moshe, Ratzaloi Meklal Shishim Riboy Nafshos Yisrael Badorahu, Ha'aminu Shashem Yisborach Chofetz Behem, V'roitzo Mekabel Nachas Ruach Menachelek Atayv Shebehem. So Moshe Avdoi really means they believed in themselves, because Moshe is a representative of all of us, and he's the neshama that includes all of Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu's Madrege is representative of our Madrege. So believing in Moshe, in essence, means believing in ourselves. So therefore, I mean, when they lose their trust in Moshe, when they lose their confidence in Moshe, when they lose their emunah in Moshe, they lose their emunah in themselves. And this is So in other words, the Nissim of Kriyas Yamsuf, of Yetzias Mitzrayim, instilled in Yidden not a emunah in Moshe Rabbeinu per se, but an emunah in all of us. And that could be explained on another level, because, the Rambam says in Hilchos Sanhedrin, Perek Chav Hei, Halacha Beis, about a dayan, he says, he shouldn't treat the people that come before him with kalus rosh. Afal pi shehein amei haaretz, v'lo yifsa al roshei am kodesh. Afal pi shehein edyotos ushfolim. Nevertheless, bnei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov hein, v'tzivois Hashem, shehoitzi me'eretz Mitzrayim, b'koyach godel b'yot chazak. So a ganze droshe. What is the Rambam saying? The Rambam is saying that when you become aware of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim, b'koyach godel b'yot chazak, it's not just a statement about the Rebbeinu Shalom's greatness and about how much he can do, but it's a statement about how important we are. We are, even if we're hedyotos, even if we're shfolim, nevertheless, with the Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Tzivos Hashem, shehoitzi me'eretz Mitzrayim, b'koyach godel b'yot chazak. If the Rebbeinu Shalom invested a koyach godel and a yot chazak bringing us out of Mitzrayim, we must be worth something. Yeah, that's what the Rambam is saying, and therefore the dayan should treat even hedyotos u'shfolim with dignity, right? So the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Kriyas Yamsuf, brought us to the Aminu B'Hashem, and also the Moshe Avdoi, which means not just Moshe individually, but in all of us, because we learned how important we are. But just like the emunah in Moshe and in ourselves is Rabba Hatalia, so when Zeh Moshe Ish Lo Yadanu Mehoyaloi, we lost faith in ourselves, and the Mela, we wanted to have a crutch. Because we no longer believed in human leadership, not in our ability to lead ourselves, and not in Moshe Rabbeinu's ability to lead us. And I say, so that the Vayisabolu, Veloishosu Ish, Edyoy Olav, the fact that they didn't take note that they still have the Edyoy Olav, that's a direct hemshech of the Chet HaEgel, because they don't have the belief in themselves, in their abilities, in their madrega. And be'emes, in every sin, b'meshech hadoros, there's an oichzin maasei avoiseihem biyadeihem. I mean, that feeling that I'm inadequate, I'm unable, I can't carry out my mission, I can't really do what I ought to do, what I want to do. Yeah, so the pshat is that feeling that I can't, that just like Moshe Rabbeinu can't lead me, I can't lead myself. Yeah, that is what brings a person down and doesn't allow him to function the way he is expected to function. And we don't give the aliyah to a Levi. We don't give aliyah to a Yisrael, only to a Levi that wasn't chayt in the Chet HaEgel. That's why about the Kohen we say kisif say Kohen yishmeru das Torah yavakshu mipiu, because they have the ability to uplift us, and because we all suffer from this lack of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, which is all about asay lanu Elohim asher yelchu lefaneinu. You know, the Ramban in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, in the Mitzvahs Asay Sheshochechon Horav, in other words, the additions of Mitzvahs Asay that the Ramban suggests in Mitzvahs Asay Zion, he's mistapik. If the pasuk in Parshas Eikev that says Zechor al tishkach es asher iktzavta es Hashem Elokecha b'midbar is only a tzivui for that generation, or a tzivui for all generations to remember forever the Chet HaEgel. Actually, the Magen Avram in Siman Samach says, so why don't we mention the Chet HaEgel b'peh every day? So he says, Lo hiskinu. They didn't institute that we should mention the Chet HaEgel every day because mipnei gnusam shel Yisrael. L'fi advarim, it could be that if we would talk it out, it would really be counterproductive. Because why are we told to remember the Chet HaEgel? We're told to remember the Chet HaEgel in order that we shouldn't fall into this trap of Asei Lanu Elohim Asher Yelchu Lefaneinu. We shouldn't lose our sense of dignity, our sense of chashivas. We shouldn't become V'lo Shasu Ish Ed Yoy Olav. That's the tachlis of remembering the Chet HaEgel. But if we would over focus on the Chet HaEgel and we would spell it out, that would bring Gnus and Shol Yisrael. We would feel like we're a failure. So the way to remember the Chet HaEgel is really a little bit complicated. Therefore, we do remember when we don't spell it out, because the main inyan of remembering the Chet HaEgel is to rise above our feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness, and to understand that Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe Avdoi, to believe in the Rebbeinu Shalom and to believe in ourselves. Okay, Rabbi Sai, having said that, I think I'm going to wish you all a good Shabbos.